So welcome to the Scrapbook Live. I am Megan Jacks. Today is Wednesday, February 22nd. It is the last Wednesday of the month. So we're putting together some borders. And I've got 3 different borders picked out. I've compiled them into one handout. It's on my blog. You can go to megganjacks.com and it'll be on there. If you're watching this on Facebook right now, it's the first comment. If you are watching this on YouTube later, you will see that it is the it's in the description below. You'll see a link to my website. I just take and compile these from the Creative Memories blog. They always have a great database or a great resource for ideas, a hint when you're using the blog. If you have a particular tool that you're wanting to see a border, if you're wanting to make a border with a specific tool, go to the search bar and type in the name of the tool and then search for that tool. And oftentimes you will see it will come up with some ideas. It doesn't always say border in the title of the blog. Sometimes it'll say this scrapbook project, but search for the tools. By the tool name and you will find it. So I've got 3 put together here for us. So I'm going to be working today with the Welcome Home collection. I am using that as part of a vacation album that I'm working on. So I thought it'd be fun to put together some borders that I'm sure I will work on incorporating into that album as I proceed through the last half of our, we had a rather long summer vacation, so it will be going into that album. So I'm going to go ahead and switch down to my desktop so you guys can see what we've got going today. So I've got my handout here. I do have one correction I'm going to tell you guys about. I put these borders together last night. I have discovered with borders by far better if I have practiced them one time, largely so I can make sure that the punches and everything that I picked out, that I know what I'm doing and can be a little bit more straightforward with the live, so it's not kind of wandering all over the place. But there's 3 here. There's 2 different pages. Each one of the QR codes will take you to the original blog post if you want to see the original anything up closer. I can tell you for, I think, the January 15th 2021, the mirrored triangles. If you are using mirrored triangles, you might want to check out the blog post. There was a couple of little pictures in there that they included on how they specifically cut mirrored triangles. I am not using mirrored triangles. I'm going to be using mirrored scallops today for this one. But if you're using mirrored triangles, you might want to check out the blog post. There is a quick correction on the Tropic Time border. Step 5, they talk about using the inside edge of the smallest custom cutting system circle. You're actually going to want to use the middle one. When I went together to do this, this circle embellishment detail here, that is not using, the navy one is not with the smallest circle. You're actually going to use the middle circle, which I call circle number 2. It's a middle size, and you'll still use the red blade on the inside track, but it is the middle one. And then for those of you who, I just have here, I say circle number 3, which is the largest. That is still how you use for step 6. So that was the correction there. One adjustment I am making on these borders is this border, this top border, they give you the measurements here. The base is 3 1/4 inches. And I'm actually going to shrink mine down just a little bit. One of the reasons is I am using leafy vine, which just I think is a little less, I'm not going to be taking up as much space as a Monstera leaf border punch does. And I prefer my borders sometimes to be getting over 3 inches is starting to be into an area that is a little bit more difficult for me to use. I mean, it goes back and forth. Sometimes that's fine depending on my photos. If I'm doing a photo, or if I'm doing a border, I tend to try to keep it 3 inches or smaller. Now, granted, I have obviously made border demos that we have bigger ones. Sometimes that's just how they work. And I'm sure that's what the case was here. When you're using Monstera, it's a chunky border, right? It's a big leaf. Those type of tropical leaves are big. So that 3 1/4 is going to be what you might want to use if you've got a big, thick, chunky border punch that you're using. leafy vine is a little narrower. So I'm going to use, I'm going to take this down by 1/4 of an inch on all of these. So I am just going to mark my paper. Instead of cutting the bottom layer at 3 1/4, I'm going to do 3, take 1/4 inch off this measurement and come in at 2 3/4. And this one here will be 2 1/4. Everything else, all the other measurements will stay the same except for that correction I gave you on step 5. So you may be able to follow right along. These measurements have nothing to do with the cutting. So the cutting, regardless of your measurements here, the cutting of these diagonals will all be the same. It's just those measurements that I'm making that adjustment. All right, so I said I was using Welcome Home. I've got some cardstock picked out from Welcome Home. I'll be punching my borders with cardstock. I am going to be using, this is Sequoia. It was the, came out as a solid core paper. It's a little thinner than our regular cardstock, more along the same, I don't know, I like it. It's considered solid core paper, but I do like it. It punches really nice. And then I have some koala gray. Koala gray is what I consider the color that really got me thinking I just need to order at least 1 pack of every of the cardstock buffets. It was a color on the screen. You're looking at it like, when am I ever going to use this color? It's just kind of a strange color. I have found that I use it a lot. I'm not sure if the Creative Memories designers, one of those designers has this as a little swatch as one of her favorite colors and likes to incorporate it. But I have used it quite a bit. So I'll be punching with that for the first border. And then the background that I'm going to put my leaves on, they use the tonal coral paper. I've got just a real nice low tone white background with that kind of that sagey green, almost that koala green in there as my background. And then I'll be doing the borders around that where they use the dark green. I will have mine will be this, I think it's kind of, I don't know, it's one of the tonal papers out of the Welcome Home pack, and then some navy cardstock. These other 2 pieces of paper that I have from Welcome Home, they'll appear in some other places within the borders. So we're going to get started. I am going to start with following right along here at the base. My base, they use a mustard floral, so that yellow base. They cut it to 3 1/4. I am cutting mine to 3. Try to organize my papers a bit. So I've got my trimmer here. I'm going to cut this to 3 inches wide. If you are the type that really likes to save paper, you could actually just have a couple of smaller strips that you would put behind on either side of the what they show is the dark green, which will be step 2 that we cut that piece. So if you don't want to have a big 3 to 3 1/4 inch piece, you could just do a couple of strips and you would adhere them to the top and the bottom behind the base piece that holds those angled pieces. But for this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this. I'm going to cut it to 3 inches. That was my adjustment. I pulled off 1/4 of an inch. I wanted to make my border not quite as thick. So mine's 3 by 12. Then we need a piece that's going to sit on top of that. That will be the background for those angled pieces. And I am using the this tonal paper, this tonal blue, and I'm going to cut that to 2 3/4 in. So it's just about 1/4 of an inch smaller than the top or the very bottom, the base piece. So you can see that's going to sit on top of that and have about 1/8 of an inch at the top and the bottom. You can see that's a nice little bit of a contrast there. You can definitely see the navy. Now it's time to go ahead and start working on making the piece that we're ultimately going to cut. That's why I'm showing this one. I think that's a really fun detail. I will tell you, you may have to experiment a little bit with what type of border punch is going to work the best for this. Some of the borders that are really detailed may not, especially if you're chopping them up and separating them a little bit, may lose a little bit of the detail. So you might want to play around with it a little bit. I'm using some more botanical punches because my trip that I'm making these borders for we have a lot of stuff. We were outdoors. We went to Mount Rushmore. We went to Badlands. We went to the Battle of Little Bighorn, and I don't remember if that's the name of it, but these are just various. I have a lot of outdoor pictures, so these are going to be great for that. So piece number 3, this is the background I'm putting my leaves on. So I'm going to cut this to 2 1/4, 2 1/4 inches. Keep that here close by because I'm going to punch my leaves and layer them on. And next is time to punch the leaves. I'm going to punch my border. So they want you to use 3 different patterns or 3 different colors, or you just want to have it so you can have a mixture of the different in there. You could mix your borders. You don't have to use all of the same border punch. You kind of just do whatever your little heart can, make a happy little border there that we're going to end up chopping apart. So I am going to punch 2 with my koala gray, 2 of the leafy vine, and then I'm going to punch 1 with this sequoia, and I'm going to layer 2 of the leafy vine kind of side by side, and then I'll put 1 of the sequoia on top. I've tried experimenting weaving these together. You really, if you're going to do some of the weaving that they did here, where you have some of the stuff in the front and some of the back, you're going to have to be prepared to cut your border pieces. That's how, I'm almost positive, I don't think there's any way that these leaves were kind of, woven together as one piece. You have to cut them to be able to get them to overlap. And that may work great for your border. I tried to do it with leafy vine and I kind of got upset about it. It was not going well last night when I was doing it. It could have been the time of day, but I decided I wasn't going to worry about it for Scrapbook Live. So I'm going to go ahead and punch. One thing I will do with this is I will start my punches at different spots. So this last little bit, I'll just cut it. This first punch, I lined up on the black lines. The more recent punches from Creative Memories in the past, it's been a couple of years now, they've given us these black lines on the outside. Almost all of them have the black lines on the inside here. It's hard to see on the video. But this first punch I did line it up at the black line on the left and made all my punches. This next one, in order to have a little bit of an offset, I'm going to come in halfway. And this way, when I put my 2 vines next to each other, the leaves will kind of be offset a little bit, and they'll just get nestled a little bit closer together. So I'm just starting it midway on the punch, and then I'll continue on. So here you can see, hopefully, yeah, when I lay them next to each other, they'll be kind of offset. I can always trim a little bit at the top and bring it down to the bottom, which I may have to do. So my offset wasn't perfect, but it's good enough. And now I'll make a third punch with the darker color. And I just picked a random spot to start with this one. You, of course, might be using the Border Maker system to punch. So here we go. I'm going to grab some adhesive. I'm using repositionable adhesive on the back side I do want to be a little bit generous. I've got, when I start to make my angled cuts, I've got little leaf pieces that might fall off. I can always just keep track of them, glue them back on if I need to. But when you start cutting apart the borders that have the details to them, you want to be a little bit more aggressive with your adhesive than you might normally be. So I'm definitely going to make sure I'm coming all the way down the middle. It's not the time to be shy with your adhesive. This next one, the little tip here is, since this is kind of a background, what I'll do is I'll be able to come in and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it down here, and see how I have this overhang? I'll be able to snip that off with my scissors, and I'll be able to bring it up here to the top. I want to try to keep the same. I have about not quite 1/8 of an inch between the outside edge of the border to the edge of the paper. I want to keep that even. Now I'll be able to snip along the bottom. And this piece will come right up here to the top. Just get it in there nice and tight. And you can hardly tell, well, you guys can't tell on screen, and even in person is okay. So there was I see a quick question about flipping it over. I could flip over the border. What I've noticed about my copy of Leafy Vine does have a tendency to definitely leave a little bit of a rough on the back side. That edge can get a little rough. So when you flip it over, to me, you can definitely tell it's the back side. So for this particular one, I don't necessarily like to work. I like to, whatever side was up when I punch, that's going to be the side that is up when I am, and I'm already getting, let's try, I got the new silicone mat. So I'm going to start I need to start using that instead. Mine needs to have a little more flat surface time so it can get all of the little bumps out, but here we go. We'll use that. I've mentioned it before to some of you who asked, this is not a wood surface table. This is actually a cutting mat that has wallpapery contact paper on it, and I just replaced it. I had a big old tear in it before, so I replaced it the other day, but it's like brand spanking new. I need to try not to get my adhesive on it, though the adhesive does come up pretty good. I do like that they gave us the, you can use it like we use our rulers. You do not want to cut on your blue mat, so you've got to make sure that you've got that you don't have that cutting that you don't forget that this is not a cutting surface. So I'm lining this up in the middle so I can rely on that and put my Leafy Vine right down the middle. There you go. So there you can see. There's my border. And now it's time to go ahead and we're going to cut it apart. So we're still working on step 4. We've adhered got our border all put together. Now it's time to start cutting it up. So I'm going to grab got my trimmer here. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to cut off the corners first. So we're going to cut off this lower right-hand corner, and we're going to cut off the upper left-hand corner. So to do that, I'm going to put it in my trimmer on my 45-degree angle. I'm going to bring my corner up to my cutting line. I can see where my cut line is, the dashed line, or you may see that you have a groove already started. That's where your blade is going. And we're going to go ahead and cut it on a 45-degree angle. You want to make sure you're firm with that because you've got a few layers of paper to go through. Now you can see here what I've got is I got a couple little leaves that are starting to fall off. If I want to, I can get some adhesive on there and put those right back on. Depending on your punch, it may not be super noticeable that you had those little pieces. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to rotate. So I cut this border off, or cut that corner off. I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. And I'm going to cut the opposite corner off, making sure that this angle here should be parallel to the edge of your trimmer. All right, that's how you know you're going to cut it in the correct direction. This edge here is parallel to the edge of my trimmer. And I'm going to make that same cut. These little pieces that want to go, I'm not going to worry about them. Those are too small. So what I will do is I'm keeping track of my pieces here. I'm going to go ahead and let that be my upper, remind myself that that's my upper corner and there's my lower. Here's my upper left and there's my lower right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting the slices, and they want us to do them at 1 1/4 inch. So I'll come over here. Here's my 1 inch mark to the right of my cutting blade. And then I'm going to come out actually to the next line. That's going to be the 1/4 inch. So I'm going to keep this lined up on the 45-degree angle and push this all the way over till I get to that 1 1/4. Double check that you stay on that angle. You should be, you can see my edge here is doing well on there. I need to turn, well, I guess it doesn't matter too much. We will be making 5. We're going to be cutting 4 segments like this. You will have some of your border left over. I'm going to go ahead. Here's how my border, so I'm going to start trimming it this side. You will have bits of this left over. We will not use this entire 12-inch length. So if you make a mistake on like this first cut, it's not too big of a deal. You can make other cuts, but they're 1 1/4 inch. Just keep it lined up on that 45-degree angle and then come over to that 1 1/4, which is to the right of your cutting mat or to the cutting line. And you need 4 of these. I think you can technically get 5 out of it with no problem, but for the spacing that they have, they show 4. We've got some nice bold 1/4 inch lines between the pieces. Definitely take your time making the cuts. There we go. There's my 4th piece. So we're going to work on assembling this. What I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and adhere this blue paper to my navy background. And now I can go ahead and put my pieces on here. We'll start to see it take shape. I think I'm going to get my regular cutting mat out because I'm going to want my T-square ruler. There it is. I was making sure. I was at my retreat this weekend. So you know how it is when you come home from retreat and I haven't taken the time to put everything away exactly where it needs to be, is that everything's a little bit, I'm grabbing it out of this bag, grabbing it out of that bag. I'm going to use my T-square ruler to help me line up one edge and make sure I'm keeping my pieces straight. You do have fairly chunky spaces between each one of these. I don't know if you wanted to make them closer together. You might be able to squeeze in that a 5th piece here. If you really wanted to, you can maybe go ahead and do that. So Amanda's saying that she is using the Monstera and she doesn't think they cut the punch borders, that they flip them over. Yeah, they may. I didn't practice it with Monstera to see how you would exactly get the pieces. So that could be that they just twisted them and flipped them over to get the various pieces there. So you just may have to figure out how it's going to get best to get that woven look or the multicolored, things, different layers on the border before you cut it. That's really what you want to do is before you start cutting it, you want to make sure that that border has the effect that you like. So I'm going to come back to this little bit more pieces there. Another person's asking if I could have left my blue mat here and put this mat on top. I may have been able to do that. I haven't played a lot with the that blue cut the blue adhesive silicone mat yet. I got it, but I was busy with my retreat this weekend, so I didn't have a chance really to play. But I'm sure that definitely would have been possible. My mat needs to be rolled out and let flatten just a little bit more. So I'm going to come in here. I really want to make sure that I have these pieces all lined up evenly on that edge. I'm going to place taking the time to get my T-square ruler exactly how I want it on here will be helpful to make sure those pieces are lined up. And then it should be pretty quick once I start putting the pieces into place. Using repositionable adhesive because I need to be able to move things around. I am not pressing really hard. I am just kind of, tapping these into place. I can tell you the other borders do go together a little bit quicker. This one was a little bit more with just the spacing of everything, wanting to make sure. The T-square ruler is not a Creative Memories product. I do see a question about that. You can find them on Amazon. You can probably find them at a local craft store. I believe at a craft store, you're going to want to look maybe more. And sometimes they have the drawing and a little bit of the drafting type products in there, and you might look there. But I got mine off of Amazon. I would love to see Creative Memories create a T-square that is designed specifically to work with our 13 by 13 mat. That'd be pretty fantastic. Just making little adjustments to try to get those edges even. I want, my spacing along these in the grout lines to be fairly even. And this end here is a little off. I think though I can just adjust this one. There we go. All right. So there's my border. Now, the next thing we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and make that embellishment circle. And of course, they use a circle. You could use any size that you want. And I had a scrap of paper that was going to work. There it is. I am going to use the lighter color here, and I'm going to make that the background piece. I practiced it last night. I was able to get a circle. I'm using, this is the large circle and the circle trios, and it is, I'll use the blue blade on the inside track here. I do have to be careful as I cut this one because I'm overhanging. I've already measured though. I know it will work. I'm just going to do a lot of holding of my template and my paper. And I'm going to go slow as I go all the way around. Okay, there we go. So like I said, I actually skipped, this is step 6 to make the big circle that goes on here. This step number 5 is the one that I told you needed a little bit of a it needed a little bit of a adjustment. Step 5. At the very beginning, I mentioned that step 5 has a correction to it. They talk about the smallest custom cutting circle pattern. It's actually the middle, the medium size, circle number 2. So when we're talking about the sizes of our circles, just a real quick tutorial for those who aren't familiar with how I name them. Tessa names them the same. The smallest is number 1, then we go to number 2, and number 3 is the largest one. All right. So I love how Ellen says that you can get a 2-pack on Amazon. You can share one with a friend, or you can be like me and you can just have 2 because you will inevitably lose one, right? You need to have one that's always, you know, easily stashed. And then I have like 5 rulers buried on this desk. So I am I love the idea of sharing with a friend, but you know, if you're like me and you lose it all the time, you can just keep it in your own stash. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the inside circle here. I'm using circle number 2, red blade. Just got some navy, scrap of navy. I may have been able to get that out of the, yep, I could have gotten it out of the back of that navy, that 3-inch navy piece. But there you can see that's the size they wanted to have. I should probably send in a message to Creative Memories and let them know the blog just has a small little correction. You could easily, if you have a little scenic photo, you could put that in there if you wanted to. I grabbed some embellishments from the Welcome Home, and I could easily just come in with, I think, I'm not going to use these because I wanted the colors out of the Welcome Home collection, but the embellishments don't necessarily work for my my layout. But there you can see that is a wonderful little cluster size to be able to do an embellishment cluster. And there you can see what that looks like. So super sweet. It's a great one to put together. You know, just have fun cutting those pieces apart. I mean, that's really, and you can make adjustments in that size if you need to. If you need a little bit wider chunks, maybe you want a little bit narrower. I don't know if I go too much smaller than the 1 1/4, but you certainly can go to 1 1/2 or 1 3/8. But that's the first border. So the next one that we're going to put together, I'm going to be using mirrored scallops. And the big thing with this one is when you put it together, if I can get mirrored scallops, there we go. Mirrored scallops is going to be great because what I'm able to do is I wanted to find a punch because the whole technique that they have you doing here is kind of our chain style border maker cartridges where we can cut off the edges and layer them next to each other. That's kind of what we're doing here. So mirrored scallops works great for that. Of course, mirrored triangles does. I also thought lamplighter might be a fun one to play around with because you could easily just kind of cut this in half if you wanted to mess around with the either the scallop side, or it does have those mimics, those peaks that mirrored scallops or mirrored triangles does. So really for this one, it's just a little bit of a playing around with it. If it doesn't work, like if you don't feel you have a one that works for you, mix and match your border maker cartridges if you want to. So maybe you want to use something, and then you can just cut off the scallops from the mirrored scallops to go on the outside edge. There's lots of things you can do here. Play around with it a little bit to see what you like. Mirrored scallops is going to work well for me, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So they want us to go ahead and we're going to cut our base paper first. And for the base paper, I'm trying to remember now. I put my sample together, but I didn't necessarily, oh, I think ended up using, I was going to use this paper. So this paper has the kind of bluish stripes on one side. The opposite side has that ironwork type, graphic design on it. So this is my base piece. I am not adjusting the width on these pieces. I am just fine with this as an overall 2 1/4 inch high, and I think that's going to be great. So I'm going to go ahead at 2 1/4 by 12. I did not see any corrections on this particular set of directions, so I think we're good. So I'm just going to keep going along. 2 1/4. This is the base of my piece. So where you see the pretty statement paper, that floral paper from Boho Escape, that's this piece here, 2 1/4 inches by 12. And then I'm going to use some navy cardstock where you see the dark navy that outlines it. I'm using navy cardstock, and that needs to be 11 1/2 inches wide by 1 3/4 inch wide. So I'm going to come back to my navy cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and cut that at 1 3/4 inch wide. And then I will cut off. So 1 3/4, it needs to be 11 1/2. So I'm going to cut off, actually, because this is navy, and navy always seems to be just a little on the long side. I'm going to measure this one out fully. I'm going to go ahead and cut this at 11 1/2. Rather than cutting off 1/2 inch, I can actually see I'm just past 1/2 inch. Navy has a tendency to be just a little on the long side. So this will get put on here. I'll wait to put it on until I have more of my pieces. Well, I guess I could probably do it. We'll go ahead and adhere this. It just gets put in the middle. So you want that even spacing all the way around it. And then we need to have a base piece that we're going to build the border on itself. You can see there's a background paper. And for that one, I am going to go ahead and use, this, it's kind of like a beigey colored with the brown flecks in it. I thought that was a nice piece for a background. And I need to cut this piece here. It's 1 1/2 inches wide, and then it's 11 3/4 inch tall. So let me cut that to 1 1/4, or excuse me, 1 1/2. 1 1/2. It's pretty narrow, 1 1/2. And then I'll cut this to 11 1/4 inch, 11 1/4. I'm not going to adhere this yet to my paper or to my border because I'm going to lay out the decorative element here, and then I'll be able to snip the ends before I put it on the other one. So now I need to punch. And I'm going to punch 2 borders. I'm going to punch one. Once again, I'm coming back and using that same, I am using the koala and the sequoia. I'm going to punch one of each with mirrored scallops. You will want to have some scissors available. I found hand cutting the little pieces worked better than trying to use the trimmer to cut off the scallops. If you do want to try to use the trimmer, you would probably need to use some Post-it notes or a little bit of repositionable adhesive on the back side. But as I'll show you, just cutting it off with a pair of scissors works the best. So I've got one in the sequoia. I'll come back and do one in the koala. The koala is going to be the color that I do not cut. It will be the piece that is left. It is left whole down the middle, and then the sequoia piece I will cut and pull the scallops off of either side and then adhere them next to the scallop edge here. So we'll kind of have a double scallop that'll be a little bit offset. All right, so I've got my scissors and I'm just going to go ahead and remove those scallops. So I'm cutting as close to the edge here as I can without actually cutting. I do not want to have anything in the scallop. I just want to cut off just the scallop. You could use the regular scissors, or the micro tip would work really well for this. I'm going to cut off both sides. I have really liked mirrored scallops. I will show you here. We're gonna put down a piece of decorative paper down the middle of the mirrored scallops, this one here. So you'll be able to see, you can't see it on there, but there we go. Down the middle, this solid middle here, I will cut a thin strip of a decorative paper, but you can start to see how this is gonna go together. I'll just lay it here so you can see. It's going to have a nice, get those lined up correctly. But you're starting to see how that goes together. That dark just has a nice contrast to the lighter koala. All right, I am going to be completely honest with you. This one was a little bit of an interesting one to put together. So I'm going to get back out my blue mat here. This gray mat's pretty dirty, but I've got the blue one now. I need to start using it for my adhesive. Just put it down. And what I found when trying to adhere, it was going to be too much of an issue trying to put these green ones on the border and then laying this on just perfect. So what I ended up doing is I ran adhesive down these outside edges of the middle mirrored scallop. That's not right. There we go. There's my repositionable. And I'm on the very outside edge. Now what I'll do is I'll come over to my piece here and I'm going to line this up. And I am just barely scooping that outside edge. I mean, really, I'm relying on the little outer bits of that adhesive to pick up my scallop, this darker scallop. And it will. Yeah, I have an ever so slight overlap. It picked it up. So there you can see they're attached, barely attached. Okay. What I will do, when I flip this over, before I adhere it to the actual background, I will come in here and put on more adhesive on that outside edge. It's just barely attached. But before I do that, I will attach the other side. Repeating that, I'm just putting some adhesive on that outside edge. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make sure. There we go. Just barely touching it. Sometimes that repositional adhesive, sometimes, you know, when you're on the very edge, it has just a little bit of adhesive that just sticks out a little over. And that's what I'm relying on to pick up that very tip of that scallop. There we go. So I've got it picked up. Flip it over. And now I'm going to hold it very carefully, just run my adhesive along that edge where the sequoia is on both sides. Getting that adhesive put on And I can put a little down the middle too. Got lots of adhesive on here, but I got a lot of little pieces. Now with this, I want it to just go down the middle. Remember, my piece is cut a little short. I've got some room here at the top and the bottom. So I want to just make sure it overhangs. Just overhangs enough that I can cut some pieces off. I'm going to tell you, if you have to pull it up, just be careful. Make sure you're grabbing all 3 pieces. I'm a little not centered at this end down there. There we go. All right. So now what I'll do is I'll go ahead, I'm going to trim off these ends. Now for mirrored scallops, I'm going to come in with I got to measure it again. I think it's just over 1/4 of an inch. That centerpiece. Yeah, I come in just over 1/4 of an inch of a strip of paper I can put there. And usually with this one, I will come in with a little bit of a more decorative piece. So I mentioned before I was going to use the iron gates. Well, I call it the iron gate paper. We were supposed to have a punch that was kind of mimicked this look, but there was some quality issues with it. So Creative Memory sent it back. Hopefully we will see it. I think it would be a fun one to have, but I like the geometric stuff. So I'm coming here just a little over 1/4 of an inch is what I want. Gonna go right down the middle there. So I'll put this piece in place. I am liking this blue silicone mat, that's for sure. Just right down the middle. Clean up those ends again. And then this piece just gets mounted right in the middle, has a little bit of that navy blue all the way around it. So there we go. We've got a very basic border that's going to work great. It will be this one will be able to go horizontal or vertical. So horizontal or vertical. They do have some ideas here on how to put together. They use stickers and embellishments to come in here. You can, of course, come in with just how we did before. You can see here that even something like this border would be nice. Again, that same embellishment concept. You can come in with a circle, any other color. The circle works really nice because of these scalloped edges. The circle's really pretty. So you've got a good border here to create that, to create a background or to anchor some sort of embellishment title piece there. All right, so border number 3. Border number 3. Okay, so this one, they start out, and you can't see it because I put this on a white, obviously the background to the handout is white. There is a white border, top and bottom of the seashells. You can't see it, so you have to envision that it is there though. So for my version of this, I am actually, I've already put it together. Let me just show you guys. I put this together last night just to make sure I knew what I was doing. I definitely learned a few things. So I will be able to hopefully walk you through a couple of little things I learned, but you're going to want to have a background piece that you're going to put all of your blocks on. You're going to want to have a border punch and some various colors here. They have us cutting 5 pieces and then 5 sections of the borders. I will tell you, you can do this with a Border Maker cartridge, but you'll have 6 2-inch segments. So when you're looking at this, this has 5 segments, for the 5 segments for this that work with the border maker, or just our border makers, our blue border punches. If you want to do this with a border maker cartridge, you're going to need 6 segments that are 2 inches each. You could probably still go where they tell you it's 2 7/16 by 1.5. You might be able to go 1 1/4, but I would probably go ahead and just do the 2 inch. They're 2 inches wide and stick with that 1.5 inch tall. So 2 by 1 1/2 inch. This is for the BMCs. BMCs are 2 inches wide versus our border punches. Now, frame punches are a little different, but the our border punches are all, they say about 2 7/16 wide, so just not quite 2.5. Whereas the border maker cartridges are 2 inches. If you're working with a frame punch, something like damask or snowflake, it's the 2 inches wide, but it's probably going to be bigger than 1.5. I would stick either going with a regular punch, the regular blue and white punch. It will not have the silver line on it. The silver, if it has silver lines here, that means it's a frame punch. Or go with the border maker cartridge. If you go with the border maker cartridge, you're going to want to make that adjustment to the 2 inch segments. You'll need 6 of those 2 inch segments. But I'm using the tree line border, the regular border punch. So we'll be able to do that. I did see a quick question about the blue mat. The idea behind this blue mat, it is silicone, it's non-stick, so we can come in here with our adhesives. All of that adhesive work you saw me doing would have left a sticky residue all over my gray mat. But on the blue mat here, it's silicone, so it's not, basically when I roll my repositionable adhesive over it, it won't stick. The repo is still sticking to the tape. It's not sticking to the mat. So when it's on the paper, it will stick to the paper, but the mat itself will not pull it off, the tape runner. So that's a great thing there. The big thing here, it is not a surface you can cut on. So I have to make sure if I use my custom cutting system that I pull it up and I cut on my gray mat. So here with this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my background piece, and I am using the Sequoia paper again, and I need to cut this to 1 3/4 inch. 1 3, actually, there we go. I have one edge that's a little, because I cut those with the border maker system, it's a little bit rough on that side. This side is still fresh. I'll cut it from the fresh side. It's 1 3/4 inch, go all the way to the outside line on the right side of my trimmer. That's 1 3/4. Now, what I found is for these pieces, it was actually easier for me just to cut a strips of paper that were 1.5 inches wide. So I've got some that are already cut to 1.5. They're the scraps I used before from last night. These are both cut to 1.5 inches wide. I'm going to go ahead. In fact, I have koala, the brown, and the blue. I need to go ahead and trim this piece to 1.5 inches wide. And I'm going to, where I've got this cut out is where I'm going to cut it from. So I'll cut this over to 1.5. Here's the one thing I am going to tell you. When you're cutting, when I cut this 1.5, I want to make sure all of my 1.5 inch cuts are cut to this side or to the other side. My cut line here is ever so slightly off of the dashed line. And that's okay. It's fine. I've had no problems with that. The only time I run into a little bit of a problem is when I'm doing things like that. I want to make sure on these narrower cuts where I want them all to be the same width, because I'm abutting them next to each other. I want to make sure I'm using the same line on the same side to cut them. So if I start cutting 1.5 inches over here, I'm going to make all of them 1.5 inches. Because my 1.5 inches here is actually might be like 1/64 of an inch beyond that 1.5 inch, because my cut line is ever so slightly to one side. So if I cut some over here and some over here, I found that I start to see a little bit of variation in that 1.5 inches. So if you cut, I'm going to cut all of mine to the right edge. If you want to cut all of yours to the left, that's fine. Just be consistent. And also be consistent on whether or not you want to see, do I want to see that black line of the measurement, or do I not want to see the black line? I can barely see it, that's fine. It's just that little nuance of, and it's only because we're butting them up all right next to each other. So we want those 1.5 inch width to be very consistent. So there we go. So I've got, I think I have all my pieces. Nope, I need one more section. So there's 4 of my pieces. I need one more, and it's cut from the iron gate paper. Actually, yeah, I'll cut it from this. So come here to 1.5 inches. Once again, I'm making sure, like, I want to be able to, my previous cut, I was able to see ever so slightly that black line. I want to make sure I can see it. And this will help. All right, now what we need to do is we need to cut step number 2, 2 7/16 inches. Okay, so you guys are probably like me and like 2 7, like, where's like 7/16? Am I going to count these things? So here's what I discovered. When you take a 12-inch length and you divide it into 5, it's like 2.4 inches. I can tell you 2.4 doesn't line up with any of the 1/8 or the 16ths. So really what we need to be is somewhere, not quite to 2.5, right? Because that's 2.5, but not quite to 2 3/8, because that's 2.375. So we need to be kind of to that just before the 2.5. We're splitting the difference, which is 2 7/16. So if you want to do it, you can come all the way over to 2.5. Let me see if I can show this, guys, to you. You come all the way over to 2.5. And then you back off one line. The little line next to 2.5 is 2 7/16. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you guys. I discovered you can cut all of yours at 2 7/16, but be prepared to cut off a little bit from each one. I found 2 7/16 was a little too long when I put them all next to each other. I had about almost 1/4 inch hanging off the last piece. So I had to come back in, and all these other ones I had to cut a little bit off. So I'm going to actually come out just shy of that 7/16. I'm not coming back all the way to that 3/8. I'm coming back just past 3/8, not quite to 7/16. Now, also, what I probably should tell you is you probably should look at your base piece, because as we know, they could all be a little bit different in size. My Sequoia piece does look to be 12 inches. And I'm going to cross-check that with 2 rulers. Yep, I am 12 inches here. So I definitely want to be a little shy of that 2 7/16. And you're going to need 5 of these. When I was cutting these, I almost was tempted to say, let's just do it with the border maker system, because then it's all 2 inches, right? It's just 2 inches. It's not like the 7/16. It's not crazy stuff. But we can do it. We have these, we have the measurements there. I'm cutting mine just shy of the 2 7/16, which is ultimately just shy of that 1/2, 2.5. We will be able to punch this thin strip as well with our border punch. And this is a technique, I mean, you'll be able to use it in various ways. So it's worth, I don't know, I thought it was pretty fun using some, do I have them all? I have all 5 pieces cut. I've needed 5 of my squares, or 5 of my rectangles, so those pieces are all cut. Next, I need to go ahead and punch with my border punch. So I'm going to take that same this one. So I see a quick question about the border share. I see a question about the instructions. The handout was 2 pages. There's one page has the 2 borders. The last one is on the back side. Well, it'll be on the second page. So hopefully everybody saw that it was 2 pages. I hope it did 2 pages when I uploaded it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to punch. I can flip over to the back side so I don't waste. If you're making 2 borders, you might want to work from the back side just to make sure that you're cutting, you're not being overly punching wider segments than you need. Once I punch this, what I can do is cut just flush with that outside edge. And this should pair up with my segment here. What I will end up doing is the 1.5 inch is a little taller than I want it to be, and you may have to do the same thing. If you have a chain style, it would probably be fine, but I'm going to end up coming in and cutting off about 1/4 inch from the bottom of each of these trees. But I'll punch my trees first. For those of you, when you're printing the handouts, you want to make sure you go to you should be able to download the PDF and print the PDF. So I apologize if it's not printing correctly. Let's see. Oh, I don't want to punch those pieces. So I'm just going to keep punching these out, and then the assembly. One thing I am going to, so when I assembled these last night, what I did is I put my rectangles on first and then I put on my border pieces. I think we're going to assemble them with the border pieces on first, and then we'll put the border and the squares on. I mean, maybe that's how the directions are. I have a tendency to just put by, no, they want you to adhere them separate. So on step 2, you put your 5 pieces on the rectangle or on your border background, and then you put your, oh, I see what they did. I'm doing it a little bit different. They have you adhering all of the pieces. I think it's because they want to have a little bit of a shadow there, or maybe give it a little dimension. They actually put a white cardstock border in there where you then put all your pieces, the seashell pieces, on top of the white seashell border. Oh, because they use foam squares. I'm not using foam squares. So just so you guys know that I am doing mine just a little bit different. They have a little bit more dimension to this by doing the foam squares. I'm not worried about foam squares because I don't think I can get foam squares to work with my trees. It would not go right. So if you have a border punch that will allow you to put those dimensional pieces in place, definitely consider giving that a try. If you're not a big fan of the foam squares, you could probably skip that section where you and put it together more like I am. I am sometimes, like I said, I'm a very visual person. So a lot of times I can just do it based on the picture with a quick look at some measurements, but I'm not always great about reading all the directions. Okay, so I've got my 5 pieces. I am going to put them together just how I put the other one together. So I'm laying them out up here at the top. The downside to the silicone mat is it doesn't want to sweep the debris off as quick as the other one. So I'm going to just go back to my other mat. Well, I got to get the debris off really quick. So just note that. It may not be the best to punch on and cut on. Put it off to the side and just bring it back when you're ready to do your the pieces, because all my little tree pieces were sticking to my mat. So I am ready to adhere the pieces in place. So the light blue here is going to get the dark blue tree. I do need to do a quick trim on each of these trees. I'm going to cut off about 1/4 of an inch. Really for me, what I was doing is I was lining up the tips of my trees. Actually, so I cut closer to 1/8 of an inch. My tips of my trees were at 1 1/4 inch. That was my measurement. Cut those all quickly. I was trying to be frugal with how I cut my pieces of paper. It made more sense to cut that strip, but the strip was just a little too wide. The base, I didn't need so much at the base of my trees. And part of that is because I'm using an edge style punch. If you're using a chain, it probably would have cut away, give you a great width. Just like the seashells is a chain style. So it punches closer to like 1 1/4 inch. All right. Come back to my repositionable adhesive. Here's my sample. That's not the right piece. I think I had a scrap there. I'm going to line up this piece next to it. That's going to help me just place so that I'm keeping a consistent edge at the bottom of my trees. I think that's one of the things by punching how they had you punch, they recommended you punch a single border. It just helps you place everything correctly. Just getting these pieces all put on here. And one last one. There we go. Now I will put them on here. One of the things when I was assembling this, one of the big things is making sure that I have good adhesive in the seam where these are going. I've got a little bit of an overhang on my punch. I'm gonna clean that up so they butt up next to each other really nicely. So I'm gonna make sure where my seam is that I have a good amount of adhesive right there on that edge. And just start adhering these down the middle. They just butt up right next to each other. My original sample, I could definitely see as I was moving things around, I could see that there was, since I didn't have adhesive in the middle, it was definitely showing that. As I would move it around, they were kind of flapping up a little bit. So just take the time this time to make sure I get adhesive on those outside edges where they meet each other in the middle. And I am pretty good. That's just shy of that 7/16 worked really well. I don't have the overhang that I had last night. If I had gone to 7/16 over the 5 pieces, I would be off, I'd be pushing 1/8 of an inch off. So there we go. Just kind of a fun, simple border. This is going to be just a nice accent border. It's a nice size. It is just, it's smaller than that 2 inches. So it works really well when you're using photos. I love the borders that are smaller than 2 inches because it's easy to come in. You have 12 by 12 paper here. You can come in with your 4 by 6s and line them up. This goes in the middle. You can trim your 4 by 6s down just a little bit so that you have a little more room all the way around them, but that's going to go in just real nice in the middle there. Same thing on this vertical border that we did. We could easily, this is a little more than 2 inches, or yeah, but easily you could come in and do something similar, rotating things the other direction. Quick, easy pages to put together, which works great when you've got a lot of photos that you want to get into your albums. So those are the borders for today. Hopefully you guys enjoy them. We'll do borders again. I like to do the borders at the end of the month. So we will do another round of borders at the end of March. Can't believe March already. But there's the 3 borders. And of course, then you embellish them as you want. So thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. You have a chance to put them together. If you do, I would love to have you share them into the Facebook group. You can do it with Scrapbooking with Meggan and share them there. And love to see what collections and tools people use. That's always the fun part, right? Is when everybody else is putting these together and we can see what you guys used for them. But also, I hope it just inspires you to see that you can look at these borders and overall designs, and maybe it's going to be a technique you want to try. That's a great thing about the borders. And I will tell you, if you're ever out there saying, oh, I want to get better at borders, making them, learning how to use my tools, borders are a great way to do it. Start putting them together, grab your tools. You can the blog is a ton of great ideas to do that. And it will get you thinking a little bit more outside the box on how you want to do it. I don't know that on my own I ever necessarily would have said, oh, let's just cut these borders apart. But now it's like, why not, right? It just gives you an idea on some things to do. So when you're just wanting to play around with your tools, is go ahead, put those borders together, and you'll see it will carry over into other things that you do, ways to layer them and all that fun stuff. So thanks again so much for joining us. I'll be back next week. We'll be putting a scrapbook page together. I don't know what it is yet, but we will meet up next week. And we should, in Creative Memories news, Monday is going to be a launch day, the 27th. It will be the new National Scrapbook Day products will be available, and the March collection, which typically in the past has been our spring collection. So we will see if that holds true. And I can also tell you, and it's no guarantee that's going to happen, but in the past 2 years, I believe Creative Memories has given us a free shipping offer when it comes to National Scrapbook Day. So if you're thinking you've got some stuff you want to order, this is a good chance to get some free shipping out of it. But like I said, I don't know. We'll find out on Friday. All that information will be made available to advisors, and we'd love to share that with you. You can always like and subscribe to my Facebook page, and you'll get all that detail as soon as I find out about it, which is about 10 o'clock Pacific on Friday. So like I said, everybody stay warm if you're in the middle of the winter weather that's coming through. And for all of you that are in nice, sunny, warm locations, I hope you're enjoying it and are soaking up some sunshine. So, all right, everybody, take care. I will see you next week.